Okay, I am standing here on the Emmanuel Harmon farm, and this is going to be the Emmanuel Harmon farm, part 11, Catalysine Springs and the Springs Hotel. Now, after the destruction of Emmanuel Harmon's farm, his future was in doubt. His house lied in burned ruins on his farmland, and he was receiving no reimbursement from the government for his farm being destroyed by the Battle of Gettysburg. The only thing left that he had was this property here that was known as his farm, and this spring that we see in front of us. And on October 10th, 1865, his fortunes would forever change. Professor Alfred M. Mayer of Pennsylvania College, which today is Gettysburg College, examined the water from this spring and found it to have some exceptional qualities to the water. It contained a lot of curative minerals like lime, phosphate, chloride, magnesium, iron, silica. And in December of that year, Harmon sent a sample of the spring water to Dr. Robert K. Stone. Now, Dr. Robert K. Stone was the past and former physician of President Abraham Lincoln before he was assassinated. And Dr. Stone found these waters also to have special curative qualities, and he equaled them to the Viceny Springs in France. Now, on January the 6th, 1866, the spring made national headlines when a Washington paper printed a story about miracle water that was coming from it. On April 24th of 1866, the Gettysburg Lithia Springs Association was formed, and a rumor sprung up that there was going to be a hotel built nearby the spring that would bring of not only inquiring visitors but past former battle commanders and governors and famous people to not only Gettysburg but to this specific farm area here where they could sample the water and, of course, while here see the battlefield. Now, by 1867, orders for the water began coming in from all over the world and the country. And by 1868, some New York businessmen began to buy different lots and tracts of land that surrounded the spring. They did this for a right-of-way and to also create a tourist destination, which would later be the Springs Hotel. Now, the Catherine Johns Toll House, which sat out on the road here on Route 30, was moved closer toward the town, and pushed by these New York businessmen so that they could capitalize on people coming up the pike that had money. Before they could get to the toll house and pay their money to move on, they would stop here and sample the waters of the spring. Now, in the fall of 1868, the foundation for the Springs Hotel was born. It was planned as a 500-guest hotel, 120 foot long by 44 feet deep. And the plan was to have it finished in time for the dedication of the Soldiers' Cemetery Monument in the National Cemetery, which would take place on June 20th, 1869. This has been the Emmanuel Harmon Farm, Part 11, the Catalysine Springs here on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Harmon Farm, Part 12, Catalysine Springs and the Springs Hotel here on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Now, on March 20th, 1869, a conflict between the New York businessmen that had been purchasing ground around the spring and Emmanuel Harmon erupted. Now, Harmon had allowed these men to have rights to bottle the waters. He had leased the spring to them. And this spring had been making a lot of money. And this today is what's left of the spring here. And of course, there was a building that was built over the spring. People began to order water from all over the country, and its waters were talked about how it had curative, miracle, healing qualities. It equaled the Vichy springs in France. A lot of money was being made, and Harmon decides to cancel the lease to these New York businessmen that had plans to develop the land, make a park, a hotel, and so on. And on April the 3rd, 1869, the New York Times ran the following story about this conflict. Hostilities in Gettysburg. The proprietor of the spring has forcibly expelled the leasers. Armed forces are on duty to guard the spring. Leasers gathering their forces to take back the spring. Pickets out on both sides. This had become such a conflict and an issue and a money-making deal that another battle of Gettysburg here on the Gettysburg battlefield of July 1st, 1863 almost erupted here in April of 1869, just a few years after forces had fought. And you can go back and watch my parts 1 through 9 on the battle here on the Emmanuel Harmon farm. In fact, it was earlier in one part that we had pointed out that General Archer was captured just about where that tree sits today, right there in the distance by the spring. Now, in August of 1869, with the hotel already built, gas lines and telegraph lines were installed, and the hotel sat over here. Other conditions were being made, like bathhouses, tubs, showers, that would allow the visitor to take advantage of these miracle waters. Some of the early visitors were Solomon Meredith of the Iron Brigade, George Gordon Meade, the overall federal commander here at Gettysburg, Lucius Fairchild of the 2nd Wisconsin, Oliver Martin, member of the Indiana Cavalry, and of course on August the 25th, 1869, a great ball was held at the Springs Hotel, and among the guests were former generals and brigadier generals Geary, Baxter, Howe, Shaler, Greene, Graham, Meredith, Slocum, Robinson, Newton, and von Steinwehr. Other things that were here were billiards, a bowling alley, and a recreation park. This has been the Emmanuel Harmon Farm, Part 12, the Cateslean Springs and the Springs Hotel here on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Harmon Farm Part 13 on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. And where I'm standing now in front of us, this little patch of weedy high ground was once the site of the Springs Hotel. This is where the foundation of the hotel was. And the era of the Springs Hotel itself, from around 1910 through 1917, came and went, and the hotel went into disrepair. The boarding around the outside began to fall apart, and the inside began to crack and deteriorate and fail. And really, its last glory moment was in July of 1913, and just preceding that, when the town of Gettysburg got ready for the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. And a lot of the Union Harmon Farm Part 13A, the Springs Hotel Bridge, here on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. And I'm standing here on the banks of Willoughby Run, actually on the Emmanuel Harmon side of the farm. Over in the distance across the run would be the woods in which Reynolds was killed. When the Springs Hotel came into being, a bridge was made here at this point to cross Willoughby Run and then head toward the Cateslean Springs as well as the Springs Hotel. And today, the remnants, the foundation stones for that bridge is all that remains. And here, what we're looking up in front of us here is on the eastern side, and then of course this is the foundation on the western side of the bridge as well. And again, this bridge was used by the horse railway and other carriages and horseback to get people from one side of the battlefield on the eastern side across onto the New Springs Hotel and the Emmanuel Harmon farm property. And again, of course, the bridge was later in a state of disrepair and was taken down, and this is all that remains of it that's left today. This is the foundation of the Springs Hotel bridge here near Catalysling Spring. This has been the Emmanuel Harmon Farm, Part 13A on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. 14. In Part 13A, we took a detour after talking about the Spring Hotel, which sat over there where that hill is today. We took a walk over to the bridge that led from the east to the west side of the hotel. And in front of us, you can see the Catalysling Spring. Just beyond it, in the distance, is Willoughby Run. You can see the McPherson barn through the trees here in the woods. The horse railway crossed the bridge and then led in this direction by the spring and then up to the hotel. Now, the spring remained ablaze with action, but the hotel ruins laid in a field for years over here. Finally, in 1935, it was announced that the Catalysling Spring would reopen and now be owned by a man named Clyde Berger, who was a local businessman. Now, Berger had a new idea, and he would open up the Berger's Bottling Works. And the building that's the Berger's Bottling Works, rather, is over here in the distance. He would build a new state-of-the-art stone building, complete with copper pipes leading from the spring over to the bottling works. The old hotel ruins, of course, which are over here, were cleaned up. New roads were built. The ground was completely covered so that it could no longer be recognized of that of the Springs Hotel, and they built new roads. And back here in the stone building, new bottle washing machines were installed. Also, Berger had gotten very business savvy, and he decided to drop the price of bottled water to 25 cents a gallon. Other plans to landscape the 43 acres once known as the Spring Hotel property were to add tennis courts, a 9-hole golf course, but between 1936 and 1940, Berger's attempt to get the public interest in this area again floundered, and finally in 1947 he sold the bottling works in the area that had the spring to a group of Gettysburg businessmen who decided to build a golf course slash country club, which would later be known as the Gettysburg Country Club. And we'll take that over on Part 15. This has been the Emmanuel Harmon Farm, Part 14 on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Part 15 here on Gettysburg Battlefield Facebook. Now, the Gettysburg Development Corporation in 1947 took over the property, and they built the Gettysburg Country Club. Now, this country club boasted, and that's all out in this area over here, it boasted a golf course, a skeet range, a swimming pool, tennis courts, a golfing shop, and locker rooms. Basically, what was once a battlefield and the Emmanuel Harmon Farm property, and later a Miracle Spring, now became a country club. And of course, Clyde Berger in 1935 built this building here, which was used as a bottling works building, where he then ran copper tubing from the spring over in this direction toward the building, where he could then bottle the water at a price of 25 cents a gallon, trying to sell his miracle waters from the old Catalysling Springs. Of course, the public didn't get into it, and it failed. Now, When the Gettysburg Development Corporation took over the property, and it became the Gettysburg Country Club. Now, of course, the hotel foundation was covered over by sand traps and golfing greens, and then houses were built surrounding the property. If you go on Country Club Lane today, all the way around, all the way down the Country Club Lane and then over to Old Mill Road, all these houses were built here as houses for the new country club, including that site where Emmanuel Harmon's farm burnt down on July 1st, 1863, when it was destroyed by fire. One last thing about the country club. The country club, started in 1947 into the new century, and then finally in 2011 was back in the hands of the National Park Service, and I'm sure there's plans in the near future to try to restore the ground as best as possible to its wartime appearance and put interpretive markers and rid itself of some of the old country club golf course look to it. But on April the 2nd, 1955, a man arrived here to golf on the course that would change the history of this ground once again forever. His name, President Dwight D. Eisenhower. At 1:30 in the afternoon on April 2nd, 1955, he started here in this area at the putting green, and he took a few practice shots, and then immediately got onto the golf course and teed off without even a warm-up. And over the next 4 years, he was a regular at the Gettysburg Country Club. One of the caddies that he would use would also be a man named Arthur Cannell, who was the caretaker of the Evergreen Cemetery, and him and President Dwight D. Eisenhower had become friends. So here in these 15 parts of the Emmanuel Harmon farm, we started out on July 1st of 1863 on the site of the Emmanuel Harmon farm, about 3/4 of a mile there directly south of us in the distance, and talked about a Confederate advance across this farm, one that's very little talked about, with several different brigades of Confederate infantry that would then cross the Willoughby Run heading toward McPherson's Ridge and the Edward McPherson farm and the John Herbst farm, and they would clash with the famed Iron Brigade. We also talked about how the farm itself, the Emmanuel Harmon farm, was set afire and burned to the ground, and went through the Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1863. Then, when Emmanuel Harmon's farm and life were nearly in ruins, nearly bankrupt, we talked about